Finn Juliet. Let's just turn that off. That's great. Okay, so first of all, I've really got Chris Friel to thank for introducing me to Finn, who's very kindly agreed to come and give us a talk this evening from Melbourne in Australia. Chris and Finn have been collaborating on work in recent years. Finn writing poetry inspired by Chris's images and sort of vice versa. I'm really appreciative of him linking us up for this talk. That is very much appreciated. Just to give you a bit of background on Finn, I'm very jealous, really. She's been a published poet since she was 8 years old. There's not many poets, I don't think, that can say that. But to broaden her horizons, she's also worked as a knitter, a gherkin picker, and an electric light assembler, while also studying humanities at Monash University down there in Australia. So she also caused the Queensland government, I understand, quite a bit of trouble in their IT department, while at the same time making their welfare payment system much fairer for everybody. That was one of her first political acts to improve things for people down there. She also knows how to build houses, having built three herself. And not only does she know how to craft houses, she also knows how to craft with words, writing both very moving and affecting poetry and prose as a published author. She's spent much of her life busy working in various forms of social work, and has a special interest and is active in raising awareness in areas of overdose and harm and things like that, which is very important work. And she may talk about that as well, perhaps when she's talking to us. And we're really appreciative, Finn, that you've agreed to come and talk to us. You're our first poet to come and talk to our group. You know, we're mainly photographers, but we're a group that does kind of weird kind of photography, really, and we're more interested in not just really in technique. That's probably the thing we're least interested in. We're much more interested in creativity and creative thought and inspiration. And so we as a group, we're always inviting creative people from different disciplines, painters and people from other disciplines and so on. And so we're fascinated to listen to creative people from all walks of life. So we're thrilled that you've come to speak to us, and we're so grateful that you've given of your time. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to hand over to you, and we look forward to listening to what you've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doug. And it's great to be here and to see that you guys kind of have set up a community. It's really nice. Yeah, please, Doug, interrupt me if I'm not coming across properly or the Wi-Fi is going scratchy or anything that you need to sort of correct as I proceed. I do want to begin by acknowledging that I'm speaking from the land of the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nations, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'm rapt to be here, but I do want to make a disclaimer that I'm no expert really on finding my voice or anyone's finding their voices. But it's a fantastic topic, you know, in terms of what you've named the group and, you know, how important it is. That's really the essence, I guess, of making art, and from my point of view, and to do it is no easy task in a way. So I guess my second disclaimer is to hope that you'll kind of hang with me a bit while I rummage through a basket of ideas that have occurred to me given the topic, and I'm hoping that I can kind of put them together in a seamless way, or at least some kind of cogent way. So I did want to start by talking about title of my talk, Scrubbing the Floor the Fourth Way. And it was an easy title to come up with, given this talk for many reasons. Scrubbing the floor, to me, is something that I've talked about a lot over the last decade or so. And I usually find myself saying to people who say, "Oh, in reference to social justice areas, oh, we've come such a long way, we've achieved so much, and the rights of people, etc." And my response is that it is easy to remove the first, ugly mess that's there, perhaps. Such as perhaps we could use the example of giving women the vote, not a long past 100 years ago, but it's harder to remove the stain. And in fact, you can scrub and scrub and scrub, and the stain can still be there. And as Doug alluded to, I have my own personal journey with this. I've been campaigning for the stigma of drug use and to be lowered for many decades now. And it really, one of the things that has occurred since I've been doing this is oopsie, I just wanted to start with this one. This is a day in which I began in 2001, and it was a very small kind of idea that occurred in regards to somebody coming from the local government to see me. I was managing a needle and syringe program for the Salvation Army at the time, and we got some money, like $750 or something, to begin an overdose awareness day, which is really to acknowledge the grief felt by families and loved ones when somebody passes away from an accidental overdose. Quite controversial, very hard in some ways to convince the Salvos that that was a good thing to do. But it has become an incredibly, a bit of a global movement, really. Somebody described it the other day, and there you can see this year's events. The United Kingdom had 35, and America, of course, the whole of the Northern North America are having terrible, high rates of accidental overdose.
Finn, we can just see your file manager. We can't see the expanded screen.
Oh,
I think you're just sharing file manager, not your whole screen, I think.
Okay. Oh, that's weird.
I think if you stop the share,
yeah,
and then when you click share screen,
yeah,
you get like a screen and it's got lots of little icons on it. And one of them is for your whole screen, and one of them is, that's it. We can see your presentation now. That's it.
is that good to leave it like that?
Yeah, that's fine. We can see that. Yeah.
I can make it bigger, actually.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
No. Thank you for interrupting. It's the first time I've done a share screen thing. Anyway, yes, that's Bolte Bridge in Melbourne, and for the last 6 years it's been lit up purple. But for Overdose Awareness Day, along with I think 6 other iconic kind of structures in Melbourne, but all over the world it's happening. That's the map of the events. They're the numbers of events that occurred this year, and you can see in the USA and Canada they had huge amounts of events there. That's me speaking in 2017. And I just wanted that, and I just, given that there's so many places that organise events across the world and how big it's got, it's still so important to act locally in this situation and any situation really. And this is us setting out for a walk on the day that we, August the 31st, Overdose Awareness Day is, and we were just going around our local community. There is high overdoses in the area in which I live. This is us in 2022 on Parliament steps. This is New York City. It's been a very important and we're just making so many mistakes in regards to the war on drugs. This is in the Northern Hemisphere in Massachusetts, I think. But my point about showing you these photos is that it's been a long haul. I gave the day away in 2013 to an institute, the Pennington Institute, and they run it now. And we still really, there are things that have improved and things that have occurred to try to get the overdose rate down. But these are all the people that have passed away. Look, I want to say it's Washington. There's so many photos on the web. I must admit, I'm not sure where that is. And each one of those flags has a name on it. So my point really is that it takes so much. The scrubbing of the floor continues, and it's very evident if I go back to talking about the rights of women, that we've got a terrible problem in Australia with domestic violence deaths and women being killed really by their partners. And we know why it's occurring, and yet it's still extremely hard to get the culture to change. And culture is, it can be very insidious and very ingrained. And so that's really the importance of me talking about scrubbing the floor, because I also feel the same way about making art for reasons I will expand on. It's me talking a while ago. They made, that little graphic in 2019. This was the first day, the 2001 of Overdose Day, and there it says that one of the things I'm proud about with the day is that the rhetoric has remained the same. So it is a day to acknowledge individual loss and family grief for people who have suffered overdose. That's me, very young me, talking in 2003, I think. That was to the room. There's a salvo right there in the middle. Very good. If I could convince the salvos, I could convince anybody. This is the Biden administration have acknowledged the day for the last 2 years. And in fact, President Biden met families who have lost a loved one to accidental overdose this year. So that was a really big thing. And that's me looking really proud of myself in Melbourne this year on the day. That's in regards to scrubbing the floor. Really, in art, I feel that it's easy to start off making art. It's easy to, like, especially with writing, pick up a pen and start writing and, and make the act of making art. But in fact, to be good at it and to create the sort of art that other people want to read or look at, it takes a lot. It takes a lot of skill and a lot of practice. And so this scrubbing the floor gets it's still going on, certainly in my life, and I think that that's not a bad way. I think we all kind of live like that anyway, in a way, like improving things for ourselves, building a life. And so for me, there's some synergy there. The second half of the title, The Fourth Way, is comes from a few things. Mainly, when I was really young, I went to a workshop, and it was way down in the country, and I drove through this storm, and I'll never forget the workshop. It went on for a few days, and an ex-priest a priest who'd been excommunicated from a Canadian Catholic church, actually, gave the workshop, which was Michael Fox, his name was. I even remember that. And he talked about the way in which we live our lives. And there were four ways, and the other three I cannot remember. But the fourth way was the way of the artist. And I knew that, over that period, even when we were just talking about that very thing, that for me was the way in which I wanted to live my life. I tried to sort of look up, things. This was way before the web was, happening. And I tried to look up on the internet what other ways he might have mentioned. And I only can imagine in my head that there might have been the way of spirituality or the way of practicality, or I'm not sure. I have to be brutally honest with you about that. But the way of the artist, I have never forgotten it. There were other things I learned while I was away on that workshop, things about my family and how they live their lives. But yes, that made a great impression on me. I'd already fallen in love with literature, and from year 10, 11, reading in class. And so even though my life took a huge swerve away from writing and being an artist, that was always bubbling away in the background. The sort of like going on from there, couple of years ago, I was at a party, and there were a lot of young people there, and this woman was talking to me about the way of the termite, I guess, and that how wonderful it is that we have something in our lives that we continue to kind of work at, like a termite. And I also, when I was thinking about this talk and wanting to gather my, ideas together, I went on to search, on the internet to try to find out what she might have been talking about. And of course, I found all sorts of other things and nothing about the idea of the termite beavering away. In fact, a beaver might be closer, to that sort of idea. But I did learn things like termites never sleep, and, it was kind of fun. But it led me to an essay, a very famous essay by Manny Faber, I think it's the way to pronounce his surname, I'm not sure. But he wrote in 1963, he wrote a really famous essay in a film magazine, and he was a film critic and talking about film. And it was called White Elephant Art versus Termite Art. And I was very interested in these ideas, and I guess I wanted to sort of expand a little bit for you on this, because this is something that I've learned from actually making this, bringing this talk into my mind anyway. And just as an overall thing, termite art is small art which burrows inward, away from all that tiresomely bourgeois signification. And in writing, it's very true if you're doing it properly. He was talking about it in regards to films. And I want to read you a quote from the essay. It says, "Good work usually arises where the creator seems to have no ambitions towards guilt, as in GILT, culture, but are involved in a kind of squandering, beaverish endeavour that isn't anywhere or for anything. A peculiar fact about termite, tapeworm, fungus, moss art is that it goes always forward, eating its own boundaries, and likely as not, leaves nothing in its path other than signs of eager, industrious, unkempt activity." I just love that, because there's so much about art that is good for us. And unless we have that kind of appreciation of why we make art, I think that we can struggle with trying to make something that's significant without understanding the relationship between us and what we produce. And I wanted to show you, let me go back to this, given, and I wanted to show you, this is the elephant, the white elephant in the room versus the woman doing something on the couch, being a termite, I think. But I have this hobby, which is making scrapbooks, and this is my writing. I'm struggling with the termite idea of it, and so this has been very important to me. But this is definitely, my scrapbooking is definitely termite art, and it's just a way of, it's a hobby of mine, and it's a way of collecting certain things that it's literally scrap. They are scrapbooks, but it's a way of not throwing everything out and making a little bit of art out of scrap. And sometimes it's cheesy, and sometimes it's a little bit, political. This is these are cut up, when people bet on the races and stuff. This is the sort of thing that they produce, and that's all our masks that we were wearing, all the paraphernalia that we gather. So this has been a great source of relaxation to me, and it is for no purpose other than myself and enjoying the sense of what it produces, I guess. Yeah, crazy in a way. Okay. Oh yes. So I'll get back to myself. So that's been sort of an interesting thing to bring to you in a way, in regards to this topic, because I didn't expect that. And yet the relationship between white elephant art, which is big and loud and trying to say something huge, and termite art is really, it's made me think and ponder, and I really enjoy that idea of the termites kind of eating past their own. They'll keep going forward, eating through the boundaries that are ahead of them and leaving nothing behind, other than a space with some meaningfulness in it, as Faber also says in his essay. And there, so that's the idea of the going, with the fourth way, living life, the fourth way. And there is also some of you overseas and maybe the New Zealand people will know a very celebrated author, Richard Flanagan, who's Australian, and he also talks about a fourth tense that the Aboriginal people have. And I also want to share it with you because it's just such a, in regards to termite art and what we're talking about, what I'm sort of gathering together in my mind, it's really, a wonderful, beautiful idea from our First Nations people. And he, recently we had a referendum which failed, to try to get the First Nations people recognised in our constitution. And he wrote an essay in The Monthly, one of our literary magazines. And he said that some years ago, an 18-year-old, I think you pronounce it Yolong woman, wrote an essay and sent it to him. And she described a fourth tense that does not exist in English. And the fourth tense is a sort of, it's not past, present, or future, but all of those things put together. And she wrote, Sienna Stubbs is her name. And she, in this essay, she says, when Yolong sing, that's not what I want to, yes. When Yolong sing, we sing in a tense that doesn't exist in English. To explore this tense, let's take an activity, say a young boy walking along the beach within the song lines. This boy was walking along the beach, is walking along the beach, and will walk along the beach simultaneously. And I just, love that idea. And I feel like art, in some ways, manages to do that. It moves on and there are trends and, people make big splashes in the art world and then, there's, they draw back. But there's something timeless about good art. And certainly as a writer, everybody wants to write in a manner which is considered timeless. And yeah, so that really was, I love that idea. And funnily enough, I was listening to Richard Flanagan has just brought out a new book, and I was listening to an interview with him on the radio, and he talked about the soul of a book, which is he said that some of the best books are not that well written. They're not, even sort of, classically thought of as good literature, but they have a soul. And if the soul is good, then the book is magnificent for that reason. And I think as we move into talking about art and poetry particularly, the soul of a piece is extremely important. To look at art and not understand why you like it is almost the best thing. And then, to like it first and to want to re-look at it and then to sort of pick it apart perhaps or analyse it or whatever you want to do to try to understand it. And you may never, even when you spend hours trying to understand it, you may never actually reach that position, but you like it. And which brings me to talk about my blog. When I was sort of, you know, and I still feel like I'm trying to be a writer, but in the earlier days, I wanted to remind myself why I loved art. And so I began a blog called SJ Finn, Eating One Piece of Art at a Time. And my idea was to write once a week about a piece of art that I loved. Just pick one and talk about it. It's changed a bit since then. I do end up spending a week with a piece of art, so I sort of justify myself that way. But I have slowed down on the postings. But this is how Chris and I met. I'm a really big fan. One, of photography. I love photography. I love looking at photographs, especially creative photographs. Actually, only almost for creative photographs. And I love Chris Frill's work. And I will share my. Oh no! Oh yeah. It's from the rubbish to now. That's just a photograph of my screen, and it's week 81. It was the second time I haven't ever written twice about an artist, or a piece of art, but Chris is the exception, and it was week number 81. And probably Chris doesn't know this, but the title alone, is just fantastic. I just love that. 500 thermal portraits from today, 37 degrees Celsius, 28 XY 010222. It's for a writer, that is a wonderful thing to see. I When I wrote, I'll encourage you to look at the blog, but I will read this to you. This is what I wrote in one of the paragraphs that I wrote about Chris's work, this particular work. This facial splintering is, for me, an allegory of our modern lives. We have, the work seems to be saying, not only many faces, but many realities as the digital world pulls on our psyches. The process, and by extension, the work, is both brutal and subtle, insidious and straightforward. In high temperatures, which nature did not intend, or certainly not presently, the effect is exacerbated. And as we watch, we are ruptured without notice and built back with layers of fillers. We are rounded and boxed and blackened out, and both coded and discombobulated. We are stretched beyond recognition. That's one of perhaps 4 paragraphs on that blog. And somebody very generously sent that to Chris. I should say that when I first started the blog, I was contacting every person that I wrote about myself. But I had made a decision right from the beginning that I would only write about work that I loved, and which made it really simple for me. And it's a great thing for me to look back at and be inspired by the work that I do love from my own blog, and which is great because I've never worried about how many people are looking at it, etc. And so I did stop doing that after everybody who I contacted was so rapt, by the fact that I'd written something really nice about their work that it didn't seem as important. But I was very grateful. Well, I was very grateful. I'm very grateful for anyone who likes what I write about them. But to meet Chris and to have a relationship sort of forged was just, so great and special. And yeah. So I we started talking about other things, and but then quite quickly, Chris wondered if I would let him, take some of my poetry and put photographs towards it. So this is my poetry page on my website, and this is unsaved. That's one of the first poems.
I'm I had a Zoom at 2, so I'm just going. It's another hour, and I'm going to come out and get something to eat in a couple of minutes.
Can I
Leftovers.
just ask you to mute, please?
She's got her day organised. That's great. Yeah, this was one of the first poems that I got published, in a proper way. It was actually in the Age newspaper here in Melbourne, and it's really about. I ran a group for domestic violence survivors, and as part of my work as a family therapist, and one of the women, this was her story, basically, that she'd run into a police station, and the policewoman behind the counter, she'd said to her, my husband's coming, he's coming. And the policewoman said, no, this is a police station, he won't come. And then he burst through the doors, of course, and they did lock him up, but, I don't know. He was out at home that night. So this is a poem about that. It's a snapshot that couldn't go unnoticed by me. And I think if I was sort of to say something about poetry in that regards, it's almost poetry in particular is like a something that is a tiny ripple, or starts as has a tiny center, and it ripples out and can make the most amazingly big statements or observations on the world. And it's particularly why I love the form. This is the second poem that I wrote that was also published in the Age newspaper, Crave, is sort of similarly about something that I saw on the street. And I guess in the sense that I saw it, it's not just enough to see it. It has an affect that actually gets under the skin, and so it's almost, you have to acknowledge it. And most of my poetry is like that. It's either that I'm in a state that I am almost, something's going on. It's almost like I've swallowed a trip of something or something, like I've just, and in that sort of state, my observation skills are huge. I notice things that I would not normally. I'll go back to this one because this poem, which is also on the same page, these poems are all on my poetry page, No Returns, is a very good example of that, of me being in a supermarket, trying to buy something. I was in the country, and I had lived in this country town for many years, so I know it quite well. But there was something about that particular day, my mood, and that I was sort of super, my alert to my surroundings was supercharged, if you like, and I couldn't get over it, the way my affect was encouraged by but it encouraged me to write down what I'd seen. And this poem is a similar thing, where I was observing somebody, a woman who was clearly kind of grappling with her want, for opioids probably. And I watched her, and it became this poem, Crave. And A Morning Shot, similarly. So a lot of my poetry, Crave is quite driven by language and sort of, small visual stuff. But a lot of my poetry is also quite narrative. And A Morning Shot, which was shortlisted in the big prize here in Australia, which I was rapt about, is also a very narrative poem. Now, I'm hoping, maybe not. I was hoping to show you. I'm going to try to see if I can. I don't know if I can do this. I'm going to screen save. Just bear with me for 1 second, because I did think I'd sorry, you can see all my I wanted to show you a collaboration between Chris and I, so of the first poem. And so this was sort of, the work that Chris was like creating from my poetry, not creating
screen share again.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Can I though? I don't know if I am. I'll just, screen share. Oh yeah, here we go. Can you see that?
Yep, got that. That's great. Thanks, Vin.
Thank you. Yeah, so this was such a great, sort of thing for me to see how he felt about the poetry. And I just loved the sort of, the extra layer that it gave to the work. And some of the poetry I've sent him a bit raw, in the sense that this one, it's been worked on, and if I will start talking a little bit before I finish about sort of, actually the work and how I go about things. But I have realised that some of the work that I've sent him needs a bit of work from my end to get it, correct. But when the poem is ready, and there's a couple that we've done that I know Chris is very fond of, one poem in particular, and has put several iterations of photographs to it. It's been great. Aging Without Claws, I think, is the poem I'm thinking of. All our work together is up on my website in news and events. So if you're interested, absolutely go there and have a little look. I just think I'll just perhaps see if I can try to find, maybe not. I was going to show you other ones, but if you get onto my news and events page and have a little look, you'll find all the poems there. to really, say something about writing, and my sort of way. And I hope that this sort of resonates for anybody making art and, for photography and whatever else people are actually doing. But so I've talked about that sort of sense of a central thing, a soul, something that is inspirational, something that you can't even measure particularly, but that you want to either look at or read, or it somehow speaks to your mind. And I I think that so that's the beginning for me. That's where I start. I'll write down even a few lines, or sometimes I've just got a title. And it doesn't mean that I need to hold on to that first original idea in order to finish the poem or continue with it. But it's all about finding a truth. Whether it is the truth or not is another matter, but a truth in the work. And I literally go back and back and back. With poetry, and prose is the same, but it's even I think more important with poetry that you have a break and you come back and you reread it with fresh eyes and you see where it falls down, and you're using your emotion to see that. And it's a matter of sometimes the poetry doesn't even really particularly make sense, but when you read it in its form, it just is proper, and it speaks to what you're trying to say, whatever that might be. Even if you're not sure what that might be, you can tell. You've got this kind of radar happening that lets you know, and the more you do it, the better you get at that. Sometimes I've taken out a line because I think, oh, that's just ridiculous. I can't say that. And then, then the poem just collapses because it hasn't got that particular line in it. So, yes, I would, encourage you to be as kind of crazy as you like. So I often, when I think of my work, if I'm trying to be not technical about it, but sort of if I was trying to describe the manner of working as an artist or doing the work, I really mean, I divide it into soul, craft, and practice. And the soul, I've written a few notes, just tiny ones, just that, the soul, the gathering together of indefinable, ephemeral, meaningful strings and hollows. In terms of craft, it's all about style, structure, precision and space, and aesthetic value. There's an Irish writer, Claire Keegan, who I went and saw speak at the Melbourne Writers' Festival, and she talks about aesthetic value, and she's talking about how it feels, really, but she's also talking about how it looks, and that rang true for me. And practice is far more practical, obviously, about habit, concentration, understanding, emotional responses to the work. So, your practice is making sure that you're checking in with your emotions. I have a trash file, so I don't delete anything. I have 2 files with any work, and the things I take out of any work goes into my trash pile, because it's always that thing you think, oh, I know, I wrote that, and now I haven't got it. And that's very frustrating. And when I have a trash file, I know that I don't have to worry about having lost it, so it doesn't interrupt my practice. And of course, discipline and curiosity. And I put curiosity there in practice, because I think that is crucial to practice, because that's the thing that will drive you to be disciplined, is your curiosity. So I did want to finish off with just saying, I did write this down, finding your voice to me means finding yourself in a way, finding out what you want to do, what you like in regard to what you want to do, and who your influences are. And very important question is to work out whose work you like, and not be ashamed of that, lean into it. For me personally, finding my voice has been a big journey. When I feel constantly at the starting line off. And if I had any advice to offer someone, it would be to take the question seriously, and then put it aside so that your voice can come from within, which, is, after all, the very point of making art, I think. So that's really what I wanted to say, and be really, keen to hear what you think, and to answer any questions you have.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. That was enthralling. I was intrigued, and I'm sure our audience were as well. Thank you very much for opening yourself up like that, and explaining to us what goes on in your thought process, and also sort of your background, what's kind of sort of led you through, and sort of feeds into your work. That's fascinating as well. I was putting it into the meeting chat, the links that you provided to me earlier as you were going through. So the links are there for everybody to your poetry, the images on Instagram of your collaborations with Chris, and those articles that you referred to, and so on. And I'll also put those onto Five as well for everybody, so that they're duplicated there, so they can pick those up a bit later on. Perhaps I can be a bit selfish and just sort of kick off with a question. I'm intrigued. I know you had a very early poem published when you were 8. That's probably not a fluke, I'm sure, but it's quite a nice thing to get an early poem published when you're that young. But did you? Where did you learn to be a poet? Is it something that you just developed the skills yourself, or did you go on a course or take workshops, or is it something you studied while you were at university, or how did you learn to become such an accomplished poet?
Well, thanks for using the word accomplished. That's nice. I did write a poem when I was 8, and when I say published, it was published in the school magazine, but it was really it was so cool.
Yeah.
And so that was, significant to me. I was making music basically with my sister. She's 18 months younger than me, and a much better musician, actually, as it turns out. But I was writing song lyrics for her, for her to write music to. And I never really sort of joined the dots in regard to that. And I'm not sure that I really want to, but it definitely was something that I loved to do. And it sort of was a thing about thinking about words, and writing in that form of short verse and chorus, etc. And when I started, sort of wanting to write, which was, in a more professional way, I was about 28 actually, and I got a poetry prose piece published in a little Canberra magazine. And when I sent it, I thought it was prose, but when they wrote back to me, they said, "Oh, this is like poetry. This is fantastic." And so my sort of, I do write prose as well, but my world about what poetry was sort of opened up at that point. And I was living next door to a really good poet, and she was, sort of inspiring me as well. So I did go to school in 2011 to do a master's of creative writing. And I'm not a big one for universities. I find them hard, not very easy places to learn a practical skill from. And I do think poetry, like many things, actually, we sort of underestimate. We think it's all very intellectual, but there's a lot of practicality to these things. And yeah, I made a very good friend, and we had a few laughs in the class, and the teacher asked me advice about therapy and stuff. But I I did do a master's of creative writing at Melbourne Uni. I sort of wished I'd chosen another university, RMIT, here in Melbourne, to do it, but it was double the price, and I just couldn't afford it. So yeah, so that's all. I have done a 2-year master's in creative writing.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, and you seem to most of your poetry seems to sort of have a narrative to it. You seem to be very observant, and you sort of see something, some incident, something, and then the poem seems to beautifully sort of capture a moment or an incident or a sort of a little story or something, and you have this way of encapsulating all the emotions and all the, I don't know, the whole incident in this perfect little gem. Are you sort of, is your poetry radar sort of constantly on high alert, looking for these things to happen in life to provide material?
I mean, I wish it was more, like I wish it
Yeah.
was on more. Um, I go through phases, and I actually, it's hard to write poetry all the time,
Mm,
because, and I sort of admire people who do just write poetry, um, and because it takes a lot of energy
mm,
when you're writing, a story, even a novel-sized story. You can kind of sit in that same story for a long time, and
mm,
you go back to it the next day, and there it is. And with poetry, you really have to come up with these sort of situations or ideas every single time you start.
mm,
And you know, I go through a phase, as I said. So I'll write 10 poems at once for whatever reason. Sometimes they're poems out of another poem because the ideas are too much, or that
mm,
they deserve their own space, or so it's quite organic in that way. Uh, but yes, my radar, I can think to myself, it doesn't always work, but I can think to myself, right, I want to write a poem. I'm going to turn that radar on and really sort of think and look. And then other times it just presents itself to me. You can't turn away. It is, the affect is there, and it's like, oh God, it hits you,
yeah.
and the poem just comes out when that sort of situation happens. You go back and work on it, of
Mm.
course, but you've got the basic bones quite quickly when that happens.
That's interesting. I'm fascinated by
Yeah.
that. Excellent. Jen, you've got a question.
You actually just partially touched on it. I was just wondering what sort of environment you're working in when you're actually writing. When it comes to you and you're writing, are you listening to music? Do you need complete silence? Are you inside a house, outside the house? What is it that encourages or, augments the flow? Does that make any
Yeah,
sense?
it makes perfect sense.
Mm,
Um, I mean, I love my laptop, you know, that's of any, because I can take it anywhere. So I can pretty much write anywhere, which is, you know, sort of lucky, really. I don't listen to music, although I've been thinking of trying to do that. I don't, you know, I'm not sure why. I know very famous Australian author Alexis Wright. She writes with music, and you know, so you know, it's a possibility that that might come in the future. I don't need absolute silence, but I do need to be able to concentrate and not be interrupted or talk. You know, I mean, yes, my partner and I, you know, we grapple with the amount of time that I steal for myself. I guess that is a very big situation for writers, the fact that they need to take that time, and for artists in general, I'm sure. Uh, and it's very absorbing. And so you don't feel the time pass. I mean, I can write for 8 hours and it can feel like 10 minutes. So I now there is habit that forms for me. So this is a bit revealing, but I write best in the mornings, and so I wake up usually 7:30, and my partner very generously makes me a couple of coffees. I do, you know, have a couple of coffees, and I stay in bed and I write. I probably write for 4 or 5 hours, sometimes a bit less, but you know, if I'm having a good time, I'll definitely stay in that situation for a good 4 or 5 hours, and then I'll do a bit of exercise. I do exercise most days, and then I've got a little studio which is in the backyard. I'm very lucky, and I go down there in the afternoon and try to give it another bash. I can write, as I said, for 8 hours. If I've also go to a place in the country and I can write there sometimes for 10 hours a day, but I'm on my own and I've got no responsibilities or anything there, so it's more freeing. In the studio, I had trouble writing down there at first, and it became a bit contentious with my partner and I because, you know, she's saying, well, you've got a whole studio. Why aren't you down there writing, you know? And so it took a while for me to enjoy being down there and writing. And I just kept on having good situations down there. And so now I kind of love it, you know. But so I'm not, when I say I can write anywhere, I sort of pretty much can, but it has also taken me, there is that acknowledgement that I had to develop my muscle for going down there and writing down there and enjoying it. And so, yeah, we are so much creatures of habit. We sort of underestimate our habitual behaviour, and we can have good habits and bad habits, and it really is about trying to encourage good habits, not pushing it, you know, just sitting there if you're not writing and not having a good time. But yeah, is to I heard somebody say once too that as an artist you have to very much protect your time and make sure you take it, and it's confronting for people sometimes that are around you, that you can spend so much time with an inanimate, you know, kind of, if you want to put it like that, object, really. Hope that makes sense.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's a brilliant answer, actually. Very revealing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Janet, please.
Hi, Finn. I'm Janet from
Hi,
Northern
Janet.
Canada. I'm in the Yukon. And I enjoyed your talk very much, but I want to ask you about one of the comments you made towards the end when you said that the poems arrive, and I think you said something about they may hit you. You brought your hand close to your face as if they just come out of the ether. And what I'm curious about is what arrives. Is it the idea of the poem, or do you actually get lines of the poem?
Yeah, very good question. It's certainly the feeling of the poem, you know, the affect, as I keep using that word, like what it generates in me. And then it's I think when I sort of brought my hand close to my face, I was talking really about that it's this sense that I'm going to sit here and develop something around this idea, but the develops to even sort of stronger word and incorrect, because all you want to do is write about it. And yes, the lines do sort of come. I guess I don't want to be over zealous about that, because writing is all about editing and going over it and making sure that it's doing justice to the affect. I mean, even I remember reading something that Chris Friel had said early on, in the sense of me knowing him, and when I was probably looking up stuff about him to write my blog piece, and he said that he said his advice is never throw anything out until the next day. And this is this whole thing about art is so emotional that you don't know sometimes what is good and what is not, and you need, whether it's a different circumstance, whether you're in a different headspace, whether you're you need that time to reflect, or that possibility to reflect on what you've done. And you can see something, you might have taken a photograph, for instance, or written a poem for a reason, and then you're reading it the next day and it occurs to you, oh, it's not really about that reason that I was thinking, but geez, it's good, or it strikes me that it's about this, and so I love that thing. And writers do love that thing of you've written something and you think, wow, how the hell did I write that? Or that's really good, like who wrote that, and that's one of the best things that can happen with art, that it's almost as if it's written itself and it's speaking to you, and you're being informed by it, even if you're the one that has produced it. So yeah, it's a combination, I guess, Janet, of those things, and I just want to get it down. It's very important to have, I was talking to Doug before we came on, and he said he has a notebook, with him, and I need to be more disciplined about that, because there are times when I've missed things because I haven't had a notebook, and even a few words would bring back that affect or the memory of that affect. And but when you haven't jotted it down, our brains are very programmed, to make a new memory, and so wipe out the last one. And so it's very important to jot a few things down, to make sure that you get that essence, that you wanted to capture, or that spoke to you, or whatever it is.
Thanks a lot. I'm really interested in processes that happen to other people, or that they use, because I do poetry once in a while, but it's when they come, and what comes is usually a whole bunch of lines. and then they don't need an awful lot of work afterwards. And I often wonder where they come from. Now, when I write short stories, what comes is the image and the beginning of the story. And then I have to figure out what the rest of it's all about.
That's great. That's,
weird. When it first happened, I thought it was very weird. And I suppose that's why I keep on asking other writers and artists, well, how does it happen for you? But thank you.
No, my pleasure.
Okay, Christoph, please.
Thank you. I apologize for leaving my mic open when I thought that I had shut it down. Thank you very much for very, very interesting talk and captivating. I was particularly interested in the distinction between elephant and termite art, and I really look forward to reading Manny Farber's article. My guess, I understand that termite art to which you're committed is related to life, to reality, and therein lies its truth. The kind of photography that we do on 5 is mostly abstract, and I'm kind of haunted also by the question of truth. I heard Keith Carter as one of the very few photographers who ever mentioned that photography needs to be true, and that whatever you do, be true in what you're doing, whatever that might mean. But my question with regard to abstraction is can abstract art be true? Or how can it be true when its link to realism is not evident? I sort of thought to justify my position that abstract art, I suppose a little bit like fiction, can sometimes be more true than nonfiction. But I don't know, and I don't mean this as this is not as one of those PhD questions, as Doug sometimes calls them. It's a genuine question.
Yeah. Yes. No, I hear you. I actually, it's sort of an age-old question, because when you see something like a true picture of something, it's hard to define what it is about it that speaks to you. So you can see one thing and you can be just uninterested and find it boring, and it's way too familiar perhaps, or there's many reasons why it might be so. And that can be true of abstract photos or art or anything, but this is why I like the idea of, sorry, I'm sort of, leaving the question a bit now, but I like the idea of termite art as in sort of eating past the boundaries of its own self, and to discover something sort of different and new. And I think that my sense of real is in regards to, when I, think about art, is perhaps a little bit sort of biased or skewed or, askew, or, because for me, the real is what I feel. It's funny, psychoanalysts talk about the real as when we're having a disaster like bushfires, cyclones, floods, and everything else is an imagination. And there's something really important about that idea, that the shockingness of something is the real, that we feel it, we know it, or, we sort of, we're suddenly having to respond to something. I mean, I shouldn't, wax lyrical because I haven't looked into the psychoanalysts' sort of theory of it enough, And in fact, I think some of it, belongs to Lacan, and Lacan is almost impossible to understand. But yeah, I would say, sorry, it's Christopher, isn't it? I would say that that we're talking about a real, as in what makes us feel real, that it sparks a interaction from us to it. I've spent my life sort of talking to parents about not overstating something to their child, because children, hear everything their parents say, but what's happening is if you say it once, the child has to think about it, and that's what you're interested in. And then, but if you say it 20 times, the child doesn't have to think anymore. They're just hearing this thing being said and said and said, and they stop thinking. And that's the problem. And I feel a bit the same way, that I might have a really kind of, warped view about what the real is, and perhaps even about what your question might be. But yeah, for me, when I talk about real in art, I talk about like the present, like how I react and what it says and how it makes me feel. And that's real, regardless of what it actually might look like. But I'd be interested to see whether you thought that was fair enough or not.
Well, no, I can relate to your warped sense of reality. I think it works. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Christoph. That's great. I can always rely on you for a great question. That's brilliant. I enjoyed that. Jeff, please. I assume it's Jeff, or it might be Jan.
No, it's Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks very much, Finn. As you can pick up, I've got the Kiwi accent. I just want to ask some questions about more practical things rather than the philosophical questions that Christoph's exploring. I enjoy working with words. I enjoy working with images. And what I tend to find is that I'll create an image and then I'll find words that enhance that and speak to it. What I'm interested in is that's having a conversation with myself. It's obviously there's a collaboration between you and Chris. And I'd be interested if you're willing to explore something of how that collaboration works. Does the image come first and then the words, or do the words come first or do the image? Is it a bit of both? Is it quite spontaneous how it might happen? So it's that process of creation between two people I'm interested in.
Yeah, no, good question. I mean, Chris is probably listening in, so I don't know what he would say, but he has mainly been receiving poetry from me, and I said to him once, or not said, because we've never spoken. It's all over the internet and emails, and we've got a great sense of each other. I think that there's a kind of understanding between us. But I wrote a poem to a couple of his photos. And he wrote back and said, "Oh, I can't go backwards. I'm not going backwards. I'm not having that. Like we can't. I've already. And of course, I understood. But yeah, it's. I need his photography in order to write some of those poems that I write for him, and I think that I don't know, I mean, you would literally have to ask him, but I would say that, he probably feels, I had a friend who was a filmmaker actually, and I told him about very early on when Chris and I were sort of emailing each other. I told him, about it, and he said, "Oh, he's looking for inspiration," And it's true. I mean, I think that we all are as artists. We need each other and to look for inspiration and to move forward. I mean, that's what's so attractive about the termite idea, that they're always going forward and not worrying about what's behind them. And yeah, it's definitely a two-way thing. And if I want to write some poetry for Chris, I'll go back and look at we've been collaborating over portraiture and, photographs of people. And I'll go back and look at his things if I'm needing inspiration and just send him poetry, and then he does what he will, That's been the way in which it's worked thus far. And it's just so much fun. It's great. I really love it.
Thanks.
So that's a question. No worries.
That's excellent. And you take photographs yourself, don't you, Finn? Do you
I
ever?
do. I didn't
do you
want to
ever-
mention that. So,
do you ever, combine your poetry with your photographs or vice versa?
No.
Not at all.
No.
No, they sort of exist in two sort of separate spheres, do they? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really love photography, I really do. And part of my finding my voice, that's why I started with all the sort of social work stuff, has been to sort of hone myself down. I need to concentrate on, as, some disciplines rather than too many. And but I love photography. But I had beautiful cameras, big, Canon and stuff, and I got rid of all that. And now I've just got a little tiny camera that I can and also I was influenced by Chris's early work, the what do you call it, intentional camera movement. And that's mostly what I do. I just take I use a lot of color, saturate it with color, and it's another hobby. It's a distraction,
Oh, that's fascinating. Very good. Any other questions for Finn? She's been so generous with her time. No other questions. Finn, I can't thank you enough. You've gone above and beyond, and I've written 2 or 3 pages of notes while you've been speaking and answering questions. I've got so much that I'm going to take away from what you said. You've really expanded my mind and given me so much to think about, and I'm sure that's the same for the audience too. I know we're quite a small group that have been listening in, but we've got sort of 200 members. They're going to be devouring the video afterwards, and I'm sure there'll be loads of positive feedback. You've been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been brilliant to have a wordsmith speak to us. It's a whole different perspective from somebody who, we get lots of visual artists talking to us, and having somebody who, is principally a wordsmith speaking to us, that's a whole different thing. And that's just brilliant. And so helpful to us. So thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your thoughts and ideas. We really appreciate it. And we will be following what you do with Chris and following your blog and so on avidly from here on in. So thank you so much for coming and speaking to us.
No, it's my absolute pleasure, Doug. Thank you for having me.
That's great. And I know Chris has been lurking in the background, but I'm sure it's been nice for him to sort of see you in the flesh and listen to you speak. Yeah.
Yes, and I'll get him back one day.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much,
Thank
Finn.
you.
We will let you get on with your day. We know you've got lots of writing to do. You've got a couple of hours to catch up with, and probably some coffee to drink to get back into your routine. So thank you so much. And I'll say thank you to everybody. And I'll get the video for this up as soon as possible for everybody else. Okay. Thank you, Finn.
Thanks, everyone.
Very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.